Unless I minimize it. You won't see that once I start.
All right, folks. Look at that. Right on time, just like some people like it. All right, well, welcome to the Hump Day Hangar presentations, sponsored by supercub.org and the Not So Straight and Level podcast. Right on time, just like I want to again thank all of you supporting members and advertisers for making these Hump Day presentations possible. Of course, a huge thanks to the presenters, and last but certainly not least, all of you folks in the audience today. Just a reminder that the 2021 Super Cub calendar is around the corner and photo submissions are open. And you've seen a lot of great photos. I've seen a lot of great photos in these presentations that haven't been submitted, so I'm hoping somebody sends a few of those in. Ted, the guy speaking tonight, actually was the calendar cover girl. I mean, calendar cover photo for the this year's calendar. So you'll see some of those pictures as we go here too. Also, I want to encourage everybody to please share the links to these presentations. These presenters go to quite a bit of work and they deserve a wider audience. So if you're watching this on YouTube, click the subscribe button at the bottom, share the link to the Hump Day Hangar presentation list with your flying friends and any little aviation groups you're in that might find them interesting. Next week, right before a number of folks head towards Utah, Idaho, and Montana, now that those states are starting to open up, Lori McNichol is going to be giving a presentation called Introduction to Mountain Flying. And Lori has taught backcountry flying all over the world for a long time, and I'm sure it's really going to be great, so you're not going to want to miss that one. Tonight's presenter is Ted Waltman, and Ted started flying at the age of 15. He's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy. Spent his career doing computer software, including work at Edwards Air Force Base Flight Test Center. Recently, Ted retired from the software consulting world and now focuses exclusively on flying and mountain biking. Ted Waltman is an enthusiastic backcountry pilot and aircraft builder with numerous flying aircraft builds to his credit, including several Murphy Moose and his current experimental Super Cub. An avid outdoorsman, climber, and general adventurer, he calls Colorado home, but continues to annually hear the call of Alaska. Welcome, Ted Waltman.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Steve. I really appreciate it. Thanks for all your support, Laura, as well there. And look forward to tonight's presentation. I've put a lot of work into a website, fly2ak.com, which I hope is an incredibly helpful resource for everyone. I don't make any money off it. I just do it for the love of flying and sharing the experience with many of you fellow pilots. So I guess we can share the screen now, Steve? Or...
Yes, sir.
So again, thanks everyone for the opportunity to present this. I really first fell in love with Alaska from climbing a number of years ago and climbing on Mount McKinley in Alaska, which is what this is, Denali for those also, it's referred to now. And my best friend who's been on a number of these flights to Alaska with me, Mike Danaher there. So the first thing we're going to talk about tonight is flying the Alaska Highway, and of course I had to pick a starting point somewhere, so I started here in Cut Bank, Montana, and of course the blue line here is basically the Alaska Highway.
Hey Ted, I'm going to stop you for 1 second, and I'm going to have you switch that original sound setting again. Just we got a little bit of clicking on the audio that I want to see if we can fix real quick.
So stop share, turn off original, turn on, okay, turned off original sound?
Yeah. And then we can go back to it. Let's see if that clears it up.
So we good?
So I think it sounds better. We'll see how she goes. Thanks.
All right, you're welcome. Let me know. All right, so I've got a bunch of pictures of each one of these routes, and You'll see some dash lines in various locations as well. Those are sort of options. Once you get off a standard route like the trench, you can go, or you can come into this Williston Lake from Beaver Lake with a dash line. I've flown all of these lines at one time or another, except for this one section right here off of the basically the Glacier Highway over Wrangell Island. So one of these days I'll do that last piece, and then I will have flown all these routes. So let's talk about them. And Steve's going to manage questions for the end of the presentation, I think.
That is correct.
I'm sorry?
That is correct. We'll do questions at the end of the presentation.
Okay, so basically, of course, this is the Alaska Highway, which is the original route for the Lend-Lease Act during World War II. I generally fly from Cutbank, which is over in this area, someplace, and then I'll go up through Calgary. Usually I'll cut the corner over the Grand Prairie if I'm doing the highway coming or going. And the highway is a great route for a couple reasons. Number one, there's civilization, of course, and there's always a place to land if you stay reasonably close to the highway. And two, the weather is almost always better because you're on the east side of the Continental Divide and all the major ranges. I will say, and just a couple quick comments as we get into the Alaska Highway. One of the things I tell people is, now, if you're going to do it, you need to be disciplined about it. And I've looked at a couple of people's spot tracks, and amazingly, some people are, in that they do stay right next to the highway. I've talked to other people on their first trip, and they say, you know, after the first 100 miles or so, we started cutting corners, because you'll see the highway just like you do in Kansas or Colorado or anywhere, start to take a big bend around the mountain, and you just take the shortcut. Well, I can tell you, when you're flying the highway, once you get north of Edmonton, there's a lot of wilderness, and if you're more than a few miles off of the highway, you're just not going to get back there like you think you are if you landed off the highway in Kansas or Colorado, because it's usually muskeg and it's hard, if not impossible, to walk through. So, you know, the highway is only a safe route, so to speak, with respect to being able to land on a highway if you're close to the highway. Well, let me back up just a second. These are some unusual clouds by Drayton Valley, north of the Calgary area. You can see you're still into farmland, still civilization by most accounts. Once you get north of that area, this is south of Grand Prairie, which is still pretty early in the Alaska Highway, actually. The way I describe it, and forgive me, Stephen Lord, it's Kansas with trees.
Hey, Ted. I get it. I get to interrupt you a little bit. We gotta see if we can do something about this audio. It's just coming across kind of scratchy, and okay. So I don't know how far away are you from your mic?
I can move it further away. Let me try that.
No, it needs to be closer. It would need to be closer.
Closer.
Yes. Let's see if that
problem the other day, and it was further away. Just so you know.
Let's see if that's what the problem is. It's kind of like it's just kind of clipping a little bit.
Well, we can try that.
Let's give that a try and see how it goes, and we'll go to plan B if we have to.
Well, plan B the other day when we tested it was a little further away.
All right, let's see how this goes.
All right. So anyway, this is again, Kansas with trees is the way I describe the Alaska Highway, really until you get pretty close to Watson Lake, which is quite a ways up the route. This is just south of, north of Fort St. John. Once again, there's a lot of trees. But one thing you do find, which is helpful in a safety context, is there is a ton, just an absolute ton of oil and gas pads and remote roads to service those wells. And you'll see seismic lines all over the area that they cut literally in the middle of nowhere. Some sort of machine must be, because there are all these straight lines, which are now a lot overgrown. But nonetheless, there's still some areas to land, even though it's almost a vast expanse of only trees, because you can find an oil and gas well occasionally. So this is Fort Nelson. and it's a good gas stop. Another tip for the Alaska Highway, most of these are major airports, of course. There's a tower here at Fort St. John, Fort Nelson at this particular location. There's towers at Waltman Lake, which is self-service fuel, but Grand Prairie, Fort St. John, Fort Nelson, though it's a tower airport in the U.S., it'd be active 7 days a week. Up there, yes, the tower is active, but the fuel is not. So if you end up there on a Saturday or Sunday, you're going to get a $50 or higher call-out fee for fuel. Keep that in mind. Plan your trip so that you're doing it on the weekday. Even if it's during business hours, just so you hit you for instance, Fort Nelson here was $50. And the guy was already here, which just frustrated me at the time. But what are you going to do? Got to pay. The good news is some of these places, Fort St. John, you got to go into town to get a motel. Fort Nelson here, you can call a taxi. Town's 4 or 5 miles away, if I recall correctly. Or my buddy Mike and I, we just were able to throw our sleeping bags in the FBO building over here and let us do that. And cooked in there too, so that was interesting. Again, Kansas with trees, but now we're getting a little closer. We're to north of Fort Nelson. This is actually on the Liard River, if I pronounced that correctly. They're glacial kettles, they're called, evidence of the ice sheets from eons ago. Interesting topography for sure. As you get further up, again, you can see just trees, just vast expanses. And you're sorely tempted, once again, to take shortcuts when you're on the Alaska Highway, because you see these roads, the road, the Alaska Highway, take massive loops in various areas that were boggy when they built it, or around a hill, what have you. At any rate, Watson Lake is a major stop, staging area in the Lend-Lease Act. The old hangar right here where you can see the laser pointer. And this is a pretty active seaplane base as well. So always be looking for seaplane traffic. The tower here is the FBO. There's one guy that's got a sweet job in there because they probably only get 5 planes a day, and he just plays video games and watches TV the rest of the time, as far as I can see. Interestingly enough, over here there's a gazebo that's really well situated. It's got fresh water, porta potty. You can camp there. It's quiet. You got the lake right next to it. If you had your own seaplane, I'd land right there, quite frankly. There's self-service fuel here as well. How's the mic, Steve? Does it sound
well,
okay?
it's not perfect. No, what's happening? It starts off okay, and then it's kind of like when you move a slide and it's uploading. It's like it's eating up all the bandwidth or something. You don't have any other big uploady things going on in the house at this moment.
Not as far as I know.
So
But
like
I got
right
a really fast. No uploads, no, and probably downloads maybe, but no uploads.
So right now, like you're talking right now, and it sounds great, but as soon as you start flipping through the slides, it's like it's chewing up some bandwidth to update or something like that.
So what I'll do is I'll just pause for a second when I switch slides.
Actually, do one thing for me too. Unshare for just a sec, and I think everybody will agree that it'll be worth the time to figure this out. I'm sorry to interrupt your flow. If you go down to the lower left there on your screen and go by where it says stop video, hit that little up arrow.
Yep.
And go to video settings.
Okay.
Go ahead and turn off enable HD.
Okay.
And then that's it for that. Now, if you go down to the audio one, down on the lower left, there's another little up arrow right by your mute button.
Oh.
Same place
well, okay.
You see that down there?
Yep.
So lower left-hand corner, there's an up arrow. Let's go to audio settings in there.
Yep.
And make sure that enable stereo sound is turned off.
Oh, audio settings. Okay, hold on. I don't see the enable
You're down on that little up there, audio settings.
Yeah, under maybe advanced.
It should be right. You can go to under advanced. All those should be on auto.
They are.
Okay. All right. Let's try that. Let's try those two things and see.
I didn't find that audio option you were mentioning.
It's not a big deal. It may or may not show up, so it's not that big.
I do have an automatically adjust volume.
Yeah, that's okay. Those should be okay. Let's see what happens. It kind of happens when now. Do you have a bunch of other windows open, like mail window, Outlook, or anything like that?
Just Chrome, but I can close that.
Yeah, do that, just in case it's off. Grabbing. Sorry for the delay, folks, but I think it's worth it because this is good stuff and it's coming across scratchy. So worst case scenario, you could actually call in with your phone, but let's just see how this does. I think this may get us straightened out here.
Oops. Let's see, where were we? So here we are looking at Watson Lake a second ago that I had up. Here's Watson Lake from a little different perspective when the weather's not as nice. And it kind of gives you an idea of some of the conditions you can find. You really have to plan ahead and be flexible, but yet both be willing to reasonably, and emphasizing the word reasonably and safely, push it when it's necessary. Because there's 200-300 miles between some of these stops. We're not talking 50 miles. So you have to plan your fuel accordingly and be ready when you get close enough just to push maybe in conditions and you wouldn't necessarily do at home, but that are still safe. This is the original World War II hangar at Watson Lake. You can walk around it. Sometimes it'll be open because there's a flight charter outfit and a maintenance operation in there, but it must be for insurance purposes or some reason they are decidedly unfriendly about you putting your camera lens over the threshold, let alone stepping over the threshold. But at any rate, you can at least look inside if the doors are open there. It's nice that it hasn't fallen down. So once you leave Watson Lake, if you're flying along the highway, a really interesting stop is Toad River here. There's a lot of course, the main stops that we saw on that earlier slide that showed the major Lend-Lease locations, stops or bases: Fort St. John, Grand Prairie, Fort Nelson, Watson Lake, Whitehorse. But between those places, for the very reason I mentioned just a few minutes ago, they built emergency only use strips. And this is one of those emergency use only strips at the time back in World War II called Toad River. Well, around Toad River here in this strip, there's a fuel gas station and a diner. And if you land here, you can go across the, land in this strip that's maybe 2,000 feet long, maybe. And you can walk across to the diner and get apple pie or breakfast or lunch or dinner, depending on what time of day it is. And you can probably camp there as well, I'm sure. So there are some options along the way. And from Watson Lake, your next stop is Whitehorse. And you'll notice we really are into the mountains once we get into the Whitehorse past Watson Lake area. Whitehorse, interesting location. Used to be able to camp right here by the FBO. I'm told you can't do that anymore. There is a hotel across the street over here, and a restaurant, and a package store where you can get beer. There's now self-service fuel, which is on the far end of the ramp right here. If you're doing customs coming from Alaska, this is probably your first stop, and customs is over on where the laser pointer is right now. And Whitehorse is interesting. The tower's helpful unexpectedly. I was coming in on final approach in the Super Cub with bush wheels, and they offered when I was on short final, hey, if you want to land on the grass at your own discretion, go for it, which I appreciated. It was very nice of them. So you can't do that. If you want to go into town, you got to take a taxi, or it's about a 3-mile walk all the way down over here into town. And this is the Yukon River over here. And there's some good restaurants, motels, etc. Once you get past Watson Lake, you're flying along Kluane Lake. Kluane Lake is a dead lake now. Maybe 5 or 8 years ago, I forget the exact amount, but at some point in the past year, one of the glaciers that fed, the main glacier that fed this lake further upstream, actually receded so much that it started draining into another valley. So Kluane Lake no longer has any water input of any significance. Many of the businesses that are occasionally here, like Burwash Landing, now their docks, the water's actually, this is from 2005, so it's a long time ago. Their docks are 100 yards or 200 yards from the edge of the water now. And there's no plan, because there isn't any way to make a plan for diverting water to fill it up. So as time goes on, this lake will continue to drain and recede. At Burwash Landing, no fuel, just another emergency stop along the Alaska Highway. This is close to between Burwash Landing and the border. You can see the type of topography. It's a broad river valley. Emergency spots, of course, the highway, and you could land on a gravel bar in any of these areas if you really had to or wanted to, in a Super Cub for that matter. This is the St. Elias Range, clouded up over there actually. And this is called Beaver Creek. The border's actually off to the right here, maybe 5-8 miles. But this set of buildings here is actually the Canadian Customs facility. So you land here at Beaver Creek, there's no facilities. You would only stop here if you wanted to camp, or stop once you flew the maybe 200 miles, 150 miles from Whitehorse to here, because in customs, you have to give 2 hours notice to advance notice by phone, and of course, file your EAPIS. So from here, you're only maybe 30 minutes from Northway, but you still got to call them on the phone, take a break, but there's no facilities. There's no restroom, there's no nothing. One time I thought maybe this years ago before I got smart, I thought I could clear customs just by landing here and walking over here, and they got pretty upset. So they don't want you to visit on foot. So this is Northway a number of years ago when they were actually repaving the runway. And you can see the type of low hills topography that you're flying through. Once again, all the way from Whitehorse along that broad river valley to Beaver Creek, and now over to Northway. The customs facility is over in here. I'm told that there are times if you want to clear customs and start talking to them on the phone, that they might let you go to Anchorage. I've heard from a couple people that flew all the way from Beaver Creek to Anchorage when when Northway was going to be closed from customs perspective. Another thing that's gotten a couple folks is the customs office is only open, or people are only here 8 to 5. There's an hour time difference across the border, even though you're only 30 minutes flying time, or if you're a really fast RV plane, maybe 10 minutes flying time. There's an hour time difference. A couple of folks last year got caught thinking they still had time to get customs here, and then that way they could keep going because the sun's up all night. Nope. They said you got to wait till the next day. So beware of the time change, and that's covered on my website as well in one of the tips. And that pretty much covers an abbreviated view to give you an idea of what the Alaska Highway looks like. We can answer questions about that later on. I don't think there's fuel at Northway here. In fact, I'm sure there's not. You have to go to Tok if you need gas, which is another 40 miles, or if you're going to continue on, perhaps down into Anchorage. Or you can go down to Golcana, which is the other option. So if you're in Northway, you can go down to Golcana to get fuel, or Tok, which is up in here someplace, not that far. So I think the next area I'm going to talk about is north from the Spokane area. So now you sort of cross the Rockies. You might be coming in from the west coast, or up, I should say, from the west coast. I should have mentioned earlier, pardon me, let me go back to one quick comment. Whetstone here is a grass field right on the border. So you can get gas at self-serve and cut bank, clear customs by landing right on the border. The advantage of this particular location and one other right here that I'm going to cover next, Port Hill or Eckhart International, is that you don't have to file a flight plan because you're not crossing the border. You're landing on the US side and you're taxiing to the Canadian side. Saves you a few minutes of filing a flight plan. Still have to give them 2 hours notice. The grass field here is suitable for probably 26-inch tires or better. It's really tall grass. It's not bumpy if they mow it. And if you can count on it being mowed, it's a great place to stop. Unfortunately, right now with this COVID virus, they've shut down temporarily, closed until further notice is the actual language. Many of the border crossing areas. Whetstone is open. Lethbridge is not. Calgary is open, but not Springbank. So one other tip on my website, a lot of people will clear customs at Lethbridge. If you look in the Canadian supplement, which is the same as our facilities directory, it doesn't mention anything about a landing fee. Lethbridge does charge a landing fee for international flights. So if you're going to clear customs at Lethbridge, paved runways, you're going to pay a landing fee. And most places in Canada do have landing fees. You will get a bill in the mail when you get home. They trace it through your N number. And also you get billed for 3 months at a time of ATC services. It's like $20, not a big deal, but you will get a bill in the mail. So over here, coming up from Spokane, you can land in Sandpoint, same thing. You got to give 2 hours notice. Sandpoint has self-serve fuel. A lot of places it pays to look in the Canadian supplement to find where they're self-serve and where it's not, because it's so much more convenient when it's self-serve. There's no flowage fees generally, as you'll find at the bigger airports, which add costs to the fuel. And there's no call-out fee, obviously, if it's self-serve. So with Port Hill, sort of unique. You land on this grass runway at Eckhart International, and you have to tell them when you call Canadian Customs that you want to land at Eckhart International. The first time I did this, I was coming up this area here and I saw this airport up here and I started to get fixation going, oh, there's the airport. And then I said, wait a second, that's paved. I thought this was grass. And then I realized, oh, here's where I wanted to land. You land here, the customs people say that's going to be a $5,000 fine. You want to make sure you land where you say you're going to land. And the other thing, this is a close-up of Eckhart International. It looks paved here, but it's actually grass just off the bottom of the screen here. So you land, you taxi across this pavement onto the road, taxi across this dirt here, taxi into this field, and there's a stairway right there, right by this truck. And then you walk up the stairs and the border station's right here. But sort of a not inherently obvious at first taxiway to get there. But it's, again, you're landing in the US. You're not crossing the border. You don't need a discrete transponder code either. And you don't need, once again, a flight plan because you're landing in the US. So here's what that field looks like. They have signs here for customs. You walk up the stairs and over to the clear customs there. Pretty easy. The reason I like this route so much better than the highway, you're still flying along a road down in this valley here, but the scenery is so much better right off the bat. You'd still have 800 miles of Kansas with trees, as I call it. Pardon me, Steve.
But hey, I'm in Missouri.
Okay, Missouri. But at any rate, it's the scenery is just spectacular. This is actually Garibaldi Park, I think, the east side of it, and you're flying up getting close to Lake Louise area. You see glaciers off to your right. Just wonderful scenery, super interesting, and you got a highway right beneath you. If you want to take a short detour, which is maybe 40 miles or so, you can fly over Lake Louise and look at all the tourists down there and wave. And further along, You can fly once you get up towards Valemont, over towards Mount Robson in that area, which this picture is Berg Lake. Mount Robson is just around the corner to the left. This is Whitehorse Peak here. And I've camped up in here, though it's a 26-mile walk to get into there, but it's probably one of the top 2 or 3 places in the world for camping. Just another view of the Robson area. And one more. So once you get north out of there, we'll see it on the map again here in a moment, and I'll point it out, but you can either go straight and hit the trench from here, which actually is behind me, or this is Prince George, and fly from there out towards the coast. We'll talk about that as well on the map in a moment. Though it's such a nice airport and you can get gas here, Prince George is definitely one place you want to avoid if at all possible. If you do have to stop here, interestingly enough, I had to get gas because I came down the trench and the pumps were closed because the power was out at Mackenzie. So I had to get some gas here, but I got just enough to get me to the next self-serve spot closer down towards Jasper and McBride. They charge a $50 service charge if you get more than 50 liters. You know, a lot of places you're going to get a service charge if you get less than 50 liters because you made them go out with the truck and all that kind of thing. And and their fuel prices are $1.50 higher per liter, or $1 higher per liter than they are just down the road about another 100 miles. So unless you have to, don't stop there. That's interesting. Funny story, real quick. Got some gas here. I went to pay, and the guy, I went to give him my credit card, and he ran it and gave it back to me. And his partner said, well, wait a second. And he goes, what? He says, they're Americans. He goes, so what? He says, well, Americans, we got to check their credit card and some other, I forget what else he checked, but it just turned into an interesting situation. Again, we'll look at the map here in a minute. This is coming up into the Smithers area if you take the Cassiar Highway north after you've gone a little ways towards the coast. I just wanted to show you, this illustrates once again the continued varied scenery that all these routes on the west side offer you. Lakes, again, you're over a highway here. You can't see it in this particular picture. We're flying right to left. So you do have landing options. And once you get over towards the coast, sometimes the weather starts to get sort of funky. This is coming into Terrace. And you gotta kind of map your way down this valley and follow the valley. Terrace Airport is over here. Terrace is a great stop because it's got gas, relatively decent FBO, relatively decent prices, at least not too exorbitant for Canada. And it's the last stop before you want to call customs if you're going to go out this valley here, pardon me, and go to Ketchikan for U.S. customs. So again, you got to give 2 hours notice, which is just a pain in the butt, but it's the customs game. File your EAPIS here. You can get on the computer here. There's something else I was going to mention about Terrace. Oh yeah, one other thing about Canadian airports. Fort St. John, Fort Nelson, Watson Lake. Watson Lake, you're 17 miles from town. Terrace, you're, I don't know, 4 or 5 miles, but if you were to come down this road here, none of these places have courtesy cars. It's not like the U.S. where even the smallest airport has one. Whitehorse, when I stopped there and got gas at the full service before they had self-serve, I probably spent $500 for gas, and I asked them for a courtesy car, and they just laughed at me. So that's one distinct difference between Canada and the U.S. So if you leave here, Terrace, and you're going out to the coast, Ketchikan, you can go out to Prince Rupert in one valley, or kind of take a shortcut in the other valley, and you sort of come into the Ketchikan area, which is just a hugely busy area. This is one of the maps. I've uploaded a KML file that you can download into Google Earth or ForeFlight. I also uploaded on my website the georeference PDF. So when you're coming in here, you're talking to flight service, basically 122 or 123.6. So you're talking to them, but they're not talking to you, which I always find unusual. But at any rate, there is an active seaplane base right. So the airport is on the other side of town. You have to take a ferry to get to town. And I'll tell you a story about that in a second. But there's seaplanes going all the time. It's like Chicago O'Hare. And there's all kinds of flight traffic coming into Ketchikan to do customs or for local charters from Ketchikan. They fly out to Kenai Fjords and do flight tours out that way. I think I have that right. But at any rate, super busy. So we landed at Ketchikan, went across because it was late in the day. We got a motel room, no place to camp at that particular airport. And we're sitting there having a beer, my buddy Joe and I, and watching these guys bring in fresh crab and dump them in a pot and boiling them, and kind of interesting to watch. And pretty soon this guy brings over this tray of about 6 or 8 huge crab. We got obviously been working at it here. But we said, well, I'm sorry, we didn't order those, but thanks anyway. And he goes, no, it's free. We got so much we can't, we're not going to eat it all. So I bet this would have cost you $100 in town. It was just, back in Denver or anywhere. Just a wonderful experience. And of all things, when I left Ketchikan this last year with another good friend of mine, Dave Gallant, just right outside of town, here's a submarine. It's like, what? I couldn't believe it. Talk about the last thing I expected to see, a submarine. Well, you never know. I have no idea what these things are. Maybe one of the listeners online does, but I have no idea. So as you fly up the coast, this is Petersburg. I've landed there, parked, and then walked, which is only about 1.5 miles into town to get something to eat, maybe 2 miles. Not a bad walk. Didn't get fuel there. At the time, they only had full service fuel, if I recall correctly. But if you have the right weather, it's just gorgeous across the water there. You can see these lines in the water. That's where there's a freshwater river, large river coming into the ocean, and where they meet, it forms a unique line. You'll see that up and down the coast all over the place. Really fascinating for me, being an interior guy, not being by the ocean, to see this type of thing.
Hey, Ted.
Sure.
Your audio sounds good, but somebody just said that those little buildings you were talking about by the sub are fishing tender processors.
Really?
They're some sort of fishing processor.
Interesting. Maybe they're supplying them with fresh seafood. Thanks for that input, somebody. Once again, as you fly in towards Ketchikan, as you leave Ketchikan, Petersburg, you're flying up the coast, and you're probably heading towards Skagway, Juneau, Skagway. South of Yakutat, we'll talk about this more later, there's nowhere to land. The trees literally come to the water. The trick, and I'll also mention this later, the trick is to try and do this at low tide, because then you can at least pancake it in on the periphery of an island or the shore over here where the tide exposes some sand or rocks, and you don't have to go swimming, but pretty much past Ketchikan, if you clear customs there, or Wrangell Island, or Juneau, you're going to be swimming if something happens, or you're going to be down climbing from a tree. Not that far from Ketchikan up into Juneau. Juneau is another super, super, super busy location. Here's another map that I've uploaded onto the website with the landmarks for traffic. They do helicopter tours from the cruise ships passengers out of Juneau, out of the town Juneau here, which is quite away from the airport. From the town, they do helicopter tours up onto the Hubbard Glacier. And so these points up in here, South Branch, Lower H&M Pass, Windfall Lake, Spencer Pass, Suicide Heights Fall, these are all really helpful landmarks. And if it's during the day, I flew up here late in the evening this past summer. It's super busy with traffic. The radio's going the whole time. But if you get up in there and you'll see there's 3 or 4 of these odd encampments What they are is these helicopter tours. They'll land cruise ship passengers here, and they can take dog sled tours, on these great loops around the area. I don't know if they're all the same size loop or same, if it's an hour ride. I have no idea about the deal, but that's what these camps are for the dogs and the staff. And they spend the whole summer here, basically, in these camps. Super interesting to come across those and see them. So you come across around the corner from Juneau, which is down in this area, maybe 40 miles down below the cursor there, and you're coming up Lynn Canal, as it's called. Skagway is up this inlet. Haynes is right over here. Super interesting. A couple things I'll point out here. Again, you see this line from where the Katsine River comes into the ocean, and the mud, sediment, I should say, in the river forms these lines. This is called the Katsine landing strip, for lack of a better description. You could land a C-46, DC-3. I'll bet somebody that was really good could land a big jet in here. It's super flat. You could land an RV in here all day long. And it's 3,000 feet long, probably. So I've camped in here a couple times. Super cool place to camp, as long as the wind's not blowing. Because you're sitting there camping, drinking a beer, eating dinner, and these humongous cruise ships are going by. Once again, the cruise ships, of course, out here, but you're sitting over here. And you'll see flash bulbs going off if they see you over there. Folks on deck taking pictures or in their staterooms, whatever. It's pretty interesting. You can walk over there. It's just sedge grass. It's not marshy. Maybe a half-mile walk, something like that, if you want to stand on the shore. But it's interesting to watch these cruise ships. Later in the day, they leave 7, 8 o'clock at night. So this is Katsine down in here with the cruise ship that I just showed you a minute ago. And this is coming up into Skagway, actually leaving in another instance. But I wanted to show you, once again, there's nowhere to land. You're over the water, both sides. Just don't tell your engine, is what a buddy of mine said one time. This is pretty deep too. It's about 900 feet deep, I think, right here. So you'd think you'd be able to get fuel in Skagway, but that's not the case. It's a super busy flight sea charter operation place. Pretty active town for the cruise ships. There's usually 3 or 4 huge ones in there. It's an absolute zoo when the cruise ships are in. You can buy fuel if you buy a 50-gallon drum. They bring it over a forklift, and then you got a hand crank. You can't see the crank here, but we took turns because it's like 100 turns for 10 gallons, something ridiculous. I mean, it took us forever to pump fuel. So you don't want to get fuel in Skagway unless you're just absolutely desperate. But the good news is you can clear customs there, coming the other way. We'll talk about that. And it's a short walk into town. This is town at midnight. There's a lot of knick-knack shops, just like any cruise ship. I mean, there must be 20 jewelry shops. There's no real estate offices because there's not a whole lot of real estate for sale, unlike Jackson Hole. But there's at least 20 jewelry shops. There's a few coffee shops. There's a good place around the corner if you ask some locals where to get coffee. So Prince George is down at the bottom of the screen here, about 50 miles. This is Mackenzie, and we're going to talk about the trench route now. And notice the distance there. It's 342 nautical miles. You got to have a fast plane, or in my Super Cub, you got to have full tanks plus aux tanks, and you got to have favorable winds, or you can't do the trench. The other item is the trench is pretty sparsely populated. I'm going to show you some pictures, of course, in a minute. If you're coming north to south, Scoop Lake is a lodge, no gas. This is some private strip here. There's a pass in here called Sifton Pass, and it's not a pass like you'd expect to see in Colorado. It's 1,500 feet high, maybe, or higher than, maybe only 1,000 feet higher than you'd be flying anyway. But it's a choke point for weather. So it might be really crappy weather coming down this way. You get past the pass and it's blue skies, or vice versa. The issue is you got to have enough fuel and the commitment, the resolve, the discipline. If you're going to do the trench, you might have to turn around halfway up. You just have to make that commitment. You might get auto gas at Fort Ware or Sake. I don't know how you pronounce that. I think those are the only two places that might have auto gas. They definitely do not have 100 low lead. And I've been told, I've never stopped there. You can do a touch and go, but since they're all native villages, all these. And I've been told not to be unduly unfriendly or something, but they just don't like visitors. So I've been told. I've never stopped. There's a few other strips off the side here, but these are the main ones I marked. This is all marshy land, a little bit of a river area that we'll see in some pictures in a minute, a little bit more of a river, and then we'll talk about Williston Lake, which is over 130 miles long or something like that too. So this is coming south out of Watson Lake, and you can see the type of terrain. Broad valley. Sometimes there's sandbars that you could get into if you had to. There's nobody in 100 miles or longer once you get down in there. There is that lodge at Scoop Lake. They do have private clients for fishing, not fishing, for horseback riding and just to retreat. And they fly over. And that's where help's going to come from, or Watson Lake, actually Whitehorse. And again, this is what the type of terrain you're looking at. It's an interesting route on the right day. It's a shortcut. It's something I'd recommend once maybe, but scenery wise, it's the first half of it until you get to the lake at least. It's not that great. Different. It's a great experience if you've never done it before. Sometimes the weather isn't always that good. Interestingly enough, all this beetle kill, the same thing we have in the lower 48, they have all the way up there. You would think it'd be cold enough, they wouldn't have an issue with the beetles, but they do. Millions of acres of beetle kill. Some spectacular colors in the lakes. It must be algae. I'm not sure. Maybe another participant can explain, why the colors are so vibrant, but it's just fascinating. All these lakes, you just agape at the beautiful colors. This is Scoop Lake, the lodge there, big long strip, private cabins, fishing, obviously. Just on the right day, it's just gorgeous, just beautiful in colors. This is that private lodge up in here. That's the next one south past Scoop Lake. I have no idea why they cleared this big area. It's not an oil and gas thing, but obviously the runway. Past that, again, it's more, there are some mountains that you get into, which really makes some, you're a little bit closer to them, so the scenery gets a lot better. I'm going to accelerate this a little bit. We're taking longer than I wanted to. So,
sorry, that was partially due to technical problems, but don't worry about it.
So interesting. We're flying along, and here we come to this remote seaplane access only cabin, and there's trash all over the place. Obviously, what had happened over the winter is the bear got in there and destroyed the place. This is Fort Ware. No services. There's a gas station here or over here, I think, but there's nothing there, pardon me, except for native homes. Now you get into Williston Lake, which is over 100 miles long. And this last year, we're flying down this, and we saw these lines along the shore. And what the heck? What's happening is Williston Lake is significantly receding in volume because of a lack of snowfall over a number of years, several decades now. It's a reservoir, not a glacial-fed lake, a man-made reservoir. So the province of BC, I guess it's Alberta or BC, I forget. But anyway, they pay the natives to come out here with tractors and rake the shoreline, because the natives were complaining that the winds that roar up and down that lake, obviously, because there's nothing to impede them, were blowing sand and causing health problems. So there's literally 100 miles of raked shoreline that you just can't believe. There's different inlets. There's places to land every once in a while, obviously. Here's a logging camp. The native income is logging. Pretty primitive. They don't, that's just all campsites, obviously. And you'll see the occasional log barge. And once you get down towards Mackenzie, there's these humongous sawmills. I mean, there must be a million trees. And then you get into Mackenzie, and I think the person's name that runs this is Lori. I can't remember her last name. But when you land there to get fuel, it's self-serve. She comes out and gives you ice cream cones, soft serve. Really nice. But the power was out this time we were there. This guy in this twin of some sort, I forget, he drained some of his tanks to give us 5 gallons and another guy 5 gallons so we could get down safely to Prince George to get gas. Super nice. And those are the super nice people you meet along the way all over the place. And you can camp here. There's a restroom facility over here. But there's just not a lot there. So if you come up the highway, once again, you get to Williston Lake. You can keep going along the highway. Or my favorite route by far is going from Williston Lake over to Skagway here. Again, you're following the highway the whole way. You can anyway. The red line, of course, is the Alaskan Highway. Excuse me, I said earlier it goes up that way. That's a different road. But at any rate, the Alaska Highway goes up to Whitehorse. This is Carcross, a super cool place to stop. And this is Teslin. The weather's not always the best at Williston Lake, like you can see, but we beat it out of there just in front of this storm. Even though you're over a road, this is Pine Lake, emergency landing spot you can see along the way. This is just past Teslin. These are huge lakes, and you can see some places you could land probably in a meadow or something like that, but again, there's not a lot of shoreline. This is Atlin. The actual runway is over here just off the right edge of the screen. Atlin's a stop that developed shortly after the gold rush in '98. They found some gold up in the mountains over here, and there was an Atlin gold rush. Quaint town, interesting museum, a couple places to eat. There is fuel at the airport, but there's a NOTAM that I didn't see the last time I was there, and the guy charged me $40 call-out fee, and he was just super. Well, the previous times I've stopped there, same guy was very friendly and happy to sell gas. So now he just doesn't want to deal with pilots anymore. That's what he told me. So you get from Atlin over to Carcross. Here's the gravel runway at Carcross. You could land there easily in nose wheel or RV type aircraft. Super interesting place. They've built this sort of touristy boardwalk area, which is maybe 200-yard walk from the airport. They had poutine there, which I'd never heard of. And forgive me for you Canadian folks listening in, but French fries, cheese curds, and gravy, which interesting. So sort of backing up a little bit, going from Williston Lake over towards Carcross, you're following a road. Sometimes you're pretty low and you're in bad weather. Once again, even on the highway, there are times when you just have to press it. From Carcross, there's internet access there. There's an awesome place to eat, a bistro. That's a 100-yard walk from a 200-yard walk from the airstrip. This is going over to Skagway. And again, you can see the White Pass road here. The railroad, I think, is over to the other side here, and the Lake Bennett way they took during the Klondike Gold Rush is over the other side of this hill. Super interesting history about the Gold Rush in Carcross, the museum there. You can check the weather over in Skagway. It's only maybe a 25-minute flight, even in a Super Cub. Again, you got to be careful. It's a 2-hour time difference. So when you call them on the phone and say, I'm going to be there X time, don't get screwed up with the 2-hour time difference. But sometimes you just got to stick your head up there and go look to see what it's like. Unfortunately, this day it was clear on the other side. Going into Skagway at night. So that last picture was up in here coming down this valley. Once you get into Skagway, I went over to Sitka one time to deliver a mall for George Campbell. Another, I think he's on the list here. This is Sitka. A lot of water you're crossing. Beautiful place, beautiful town. It's in a lot of history here from the Russians who first colonized this area. Cruise ships do stop in Sitka as well as Skagway. If you have the time, you can get a car. You can go hike up this area where there was an old artillery emplacement guarding the harbor back in World War II. Just some awesome hiking, amazing trails. And if you're lucky, when you're flying over all that water, you can see whales. Just some incredible scenery here. And Sitka has a park with some totem poles, and you're walking around this park, and there's just a zillion salmon, and you're going, where are the bears? Where are they? So walking around the totem pole park here, super interesting history. So now we can't see it because I can't. How do I get this out of the way? There we go. So if we're in Skagway, we're going to go to Haines. Then we got three options. I'll speed through this. You can go up this Taquine Valley, come over Glacier Bay. This is another reason I just love this route. You get to tour Glacier Bay. Or you can go up the Davidson Glacier, the Endicott Glacier, come down into Glacier Bay. Or if the weather's bad, I've had to do that, come all the way around to Gustavus here. And then you can take a shortcut, which I've never done. The Park Service pilot told me about this shortcut in some really bad weather that I wouldn't have done, but he thought it was fine. Or you go around Cape Spencer here and up. This is Haines on a bit of a rainy day, the old parade ground from World War II. The airport's 3 or 4 miles off to the right. This is the airport. There's two folks that base out of there, flydrake.com and mountainflyingservices.com. They're on my website. But Paul is the gentleman who flies a Beaver out of there, flies it over to Skagway and does flight tours. And Drake flies a 185 and 206, does flight tours as well. They both gave me many tips on places to go and see. And you can fly up the Taquine Valley up this way and go over to Glacier Bay. There's bears around Haines. This is down on the beach just south of Haines at the Davidson Glacier. I had to spend 2 days there waiting out 40-mile-an-hour winds with my buddy Mike Danaher. And we watched a couple of cruise ship excursions with maybe 20 passenger skiffs going through these, what had to be 3 or 4 foot waves. They had to be just puking the whole way. It was awful. But we were standing there watching them. But touring Glacier Bay and this whole region, oh my goodness gracious. This is Mount Fairweather, which is 15.5. I've flown around the summit there. Fairweather named by Captain Cook in 1790 something. I got it in my notes here. But the weather's never fair, rarely fair. Summit of Mount Fairweather. This is starting to come up the Taquine Valley over the other side of this ridge, Glacier Bay. This is Mount Krause and the Willard Glacier. This is Muir Inlet, and it's just spectacular scenery, just gorgeous. If you have the opportunity, this is the McBride Glacier, that calves into this inlet. You can see the icebergs coming out. I've landed down in here. One thing that's unique about the Alaska area, you can legally land in national parks with an airplane. You cannot legally land in a national park with a helicopter. Don't ask me why, I have no idea. But you look up the regs, and you can land. Beaches, gravel bars, anywhere, like within Glacier Bay National Park. You can't do that anywhere, of course, in the lower 48. This is Muir Inlet. Just gorgeous scenery, just otherworldly. The Brady Glacier, 27 miles long, 2,000 or 3,000 feet thick. A lot of cocktail ice cubes there. Pressure waves in the glacier. Gustavus, where it rains more often than not. They do have fuel there. They didn't used to, but now there's a truck. Call the number. The gentleman that owns the general store there in town is happy to come out. Really lousy weather day. A guy in a Cirrus in Gustavus had been there for a week waiting. But I decided, well, if there's a 300-foot ceiling, you're on the ocean, you're not going to hit anything. So we flew down around Cape Spencer. Now, here's the advantage. Once you get around Glacier Bay there are beaches all the way to Anchorage, basically, almost, kind of. Basically all the way to Cordova. You can land anywhere. on these beaches and explore, camp, what have you. If you've never landed on a beach, this was my first beach landing. Just awesome. Here's a short video. You can see tracks from the beaver that had landed there before me with Paul. There's tons of bears around here. I was going to camp here with Dave Gallant last summer, but there's tracks everywhere, so we didn't camp there. This is Dry Bay, a little bit further up the coast. You could land there with just about any airplane. It's 3,600 feet long. There's the runway. There's a little fish processing plant here. This is East Outset cabin. There's a ton of Forest Service cabins in this area. It doesn't show it in this picture, but it was pouring rain that day and we'd had enough. And you can see how it was raining. A couple of park rangers that were patrolling the area drove up and visited with us, super nice folks, but they had double suits on. This is Tanis Mesa. Pardon me, you can land there. Forest Service cabin. It's a little rougher, so you can see that generally you're not going to get in there with an RV, whereas you could at Dry Bay. But here you pretty much want a tail dragger or big tires on your nose dragger. Flying up the coast, Mount Fairweather from the other side. Flying into Yakutat, not always the greatest weather, but a better day into Yakutat. This is the old World War II hangar where the fuel option is. Super nice guy. Bob runs the fuel option there. Super great guy. Brings you fresh cookies, chocolate chip cookies. Don't get fuel over here, which used to be the only option. These guys are not friendly. Let's put it that way. There is a place here if you're there at the breakfast, lunch, or dinner time. There's a restaurant here. Excellent. And they'll make you a sandwich if it's the middle of the afternoon. There's the hangar in World War II. Real quick, you can either fly Russell from Yakutat at the airport. You can either go around Russell Fjord and up the coast, or you can cross over Yakutat Bay. I've done this once. I've done the straight flight, which is about a 30-minute crossing in the Super Cub. Probably not going to survive if you go down there because it's 35-degree water. Cruise ships go in there. This is the Hubbard Glacier. The Hubbard Glacier in 1986 and 2002 surged over to the land here and created a dam. So it dammed up Russell Fjord here to the point where they were considering dynamiting the surged area here because they were afraid it would back up and flood the plane in the airport. A super cool area to fly over. There's a cabin here called Esker Stream that I haven't seen from the air, but it's right in this area here someplace. And Yakutat Airport's back around the corner up in here. Maybe up further. This is the Malaspina Glacier. It really is a glacier, and you can see the ice here. See the white? There's a forest growing on the glacier. And you can see what I mean. This is all ice. And it's been there. There's so much detritus on top that the forest is growing there. That's Mount St. Elias. The Malaspina Glacier is the largest Piedmont glacier in the world, meaning it comes out of the mountains and spreads out before reaching the sea. So it's not a tidewater glacier, it's a Piedmont glacier. Mount St. Elias, 18,008 feet. Going up the coast, you can see there's plenty of beaches to land. This is Lituya Bay. I'll go through these real quick. Super pretty spot, a very deadly spot. This entire island was wiped out, and part of the bay was wiped out by the largest tsunami ever recorded, 1958, 1,700 feet high. A part of this mountain broke off, slid down, splashed in the water on the other side here, created a splash which wiped out the trees 1,700 feet up. And you can still see the scar line along the shore. A little bit further up, this is Icy Bay, my favorite all-time spot for sure. There's a point here you can land. They do a lot of kayak trips out of here called Kagite Point. There was a similar landslide to what I just described in Lituya Bay that wiped out this vegetation completely when the wave came up Tan Fjord and out to sea, the tsunami, which was about 2 weeks after I'd landed there that year. Another 20-second video here. So you can land on this strip here, about 400 feet long maybe, and go visit the waterfalls. It's just crazy how loud they are. How much water is coming out of the glaciers, just beyond belief. Amazing. And this is camping. You've seen the cover photo. Thank you, Steve, from the calendar this past year. Has to be the all-time best spot in the universe. Mount St. Elias, 18,000 feet. You're 5 miles from the summit, maybe down here at sea level. Just unbelievably pretty. Bear tracks all over the place there as well. This is Yakataga, further up the coast. Well-maintained strip because it's a radio relay between Anchorage and Vancouver. So it's always going to be there, always well-maintained, because the FAA comes down there and maintain their radio relays. You've seen these pictures on supercub.org a couple times. It's an old logging barge on the beach. Had to stop there with my buddy Joe Dana and check it out. There's a lot of bears all over the place. This is the Sayu River, TSIU lodge, private lodge. Eventually you get up into the Cordova area where there's a strip just around the corner here. I'll show you in a second. This is Shipyard Bay, where the old, where there's a bunch of wrecks. I'm just going to go through this real quick. I went up to, when you're doing the coast, I've flown over Garibaldi National Park, flown straight up the coast, nowhere to land until you get up into Ketchikan here. This is the route I covered before at Terrace and out to the coast, if you recall. Prince George, that we covered previously as well. So low tide, you can see what I mean. Places to land. If you're flying up the coast, there's Mount Baker in the US, Garibaldi National Park. Flying up Butte Inlet, super remote place, super cool. Not on the charts. There's this super cool paved runway. Some rich guy has a private retreat there that's paved. I'm not going to show this video. It's about 45 seconds. There's a strip here at Butte Inlet and some cabins over here you can stay at for a nominal fee. Bears there, owner's dog trying to chase the bear away. This is taking off from there. If anybody could land here in an RV, and I'll show you this real quick. Pretty smooth, really smooth. And the lodge is over here. They'll come get you. This is Mount Waddington, maybe 30, 40 miles from that strip, the highest mountain in the Coast Range. This is flying up the river valley just outside, pardon me, of Butte Inlet, out towards the interior to go to a bed and breakfast that we heard about. It's not on the charts. Flying up the coast, you get the idea. Beautiful, awesome, but nowhere to land. Gorgeous scenery, just absolutely gorgeous. Land by the cruise ship and maybe they'll come pick you up. Just amazing scenery. Flying up the coast, there's all this sedge grass, and you can see all these tracks through the grass. This is like candy for bears. I mean, we saw 50 bears in 10 miles. And here's one that stood up to see who we were and what we were doing there. Super cool. Wish we'd had a telephoto at the time going by, but we didn't want to circle and bother them. This is getting close to Cordova again. This is the the Chugach Range in the distance. Out of Cordova, you can fly up the Copper River Valley and you get into the McCarthy area. Now I'm going to just go through these real quick for 2 seconds. So Wrangell St. Elias, Kalina National Park, Tontonsini National Park, and Glacier Bay down here. 35,000 square miles is the size of the largest World Heritage Park on Earth. Wrangell St. Elias is the largest national park in the United States. This is Yellowstone, the largest park in the lower 48, and this is the size, this red square that I mocked up. Compare the size of Wrangell St. Elias Park with Yellowstone. Huge. And these are just some quick teaser pictures from last summer. I could do a follow-on presentation about the McCarthy area, which is kind of like Idaho. There's a million strips in this area, just many, many strips. Second largest ice fall in the world, the Stairway Ice Fall, second only to the ice fall below Everest. There's one of the backcountry strips called the Foss, just 10-minute flight out of McCarthy, maybe 1,000 feet long. They take a beaver in here in 185. The town of McCarthy has a lot of interesting artifacts, including moose. I saw a ton of moose and grizzly bears actually just right next to town as well. I didn't see them. Everybody else saw them, but the grizzly bears too. So, Blackburn, Castle Peak, just on the way to McCarthy here, and maybe some other time we can do a presentation about that. That's it, folks. Thanks so very much for the opportunity to present this to you. Thank you so much. My honor and my pleasure to do this.
Yeah, thank you. That was awesome. And sorry about the audio stuff we had early, and the way we fixed it makes no sense at all. But by Laura and I leaving ourselves unmuted, for some reason it cleaned it up. So a couple of questions. One thing that thing was not a fish processor. Those were sonic testing facilities that were by that submarine. There's some sort of sound testing thing that they do up in that area. Huh. So that's what somebody said earlier. And the color in the water is caused by copper oxide, according to someone here.
Huh.
And you can unshare your screen if you want to while you're answering questions. We have the one thumbs up for poutine, and
and Kurt Cole says now he can say he's been to a TED Talk.
Been to a what? I'm sorry.
Now he's been to a TED Talk.
Oh, thank you. I didn't think of that, but that's a good, that's a funny one. I tried poutine, but I did not like it.
Oh, is that right? So Ted, we had a little exchange this morning about the Forest Service cabins.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention.
No, that's okay. I was just reminded of it.
So let me mention there's 144 public use cabins in the Tongass National Forest area, and there's some additional ones up in the Wrangell St. Elias National Park, maybe 30 or so extra. And there's a move afoot. It's on the website now under the links page under the Tongass National Forest. There's a PDF that talks about the cabin, an updated plan for whether or not they're going to keep all these cabins open. And apparently 26 of the cabins just don't get enough use, less than 30 days per year. It seems the discriminator is that those often are fly-in only cabins. And of course, it's difficult for people to access those, so they get very little use. Some of these cabins are free. Most of them are 25 bucks a night or some nominal fee where you can go online and make a reservation. But things are changing, folks. The cabins are super neat. I showed you one picture of the Outset River cabin. Bill Rusk is showing numerous awesome pictures of the cabins that he's been in. Generally, we throw up a tent, but there are a few places, Jake's Bar by McCarthy, Outset River, Tannis Mesa, those cabins are sparse, but welcome in a rain for sure.
What one person asked, where would you go for maintenance if you had trouble up there?
You'd have to go to Valdez. You might be able to find something at Cordova at Mudhole Smith. The city municipal airport does have a small operation where if it were a Super Cub or a 185 or a Beaver, there's going to be maintenance available for those because there are work planes all over that area. And even the smaller airports are going to have those. But if you need a part for a 182 or a 206, yeah, you probably even have some options there at some of these places like Cordova, Valdez. Yakutat, no, I don't think. There's not even cell service at Yakutat, surprisingly enough. Haines, no. Skagway, yes. not as accessible as you might think.
Yeah. So a couple other questions. Wendy asks, what was the route after the Alaska Highway route? Was that the Cassiar Highway route?
Some of that was north from Spokane over the Cassiar Highway. You can take that up towards Smithers and Dees Lake and then come into Watson Lake that way and follow a highway the whole way as well. Very scenic, much more scenic than the Alaska Highway, I think. Still safe because you're by a highway. You can still get over to the Alaska Highway for the last part. I'd highly recommend that over the initial part of the highway as an option. Email me. My email is on the website too. Happy to answer questions.
And she was also asking two questions. I'll ask them both and you can address them both. One, she's curious what your favorite route is. And then also, given the current situation we're in here, is the Canadian border closed to pilots flying through and landing in Canada on the way to from Alaska?
Canadian border is not closed. However, they have limited the number of places you can clear customs. Whitehorse is open. Whetstone is open. Calgary, if you don't want to land at International, is open. Eckhart International is not open. Abbotsford is open. So there's a link on my website under the Customs tab for Canadian COVID-19 airports of entry, but it's only about 50 total, spread out over the entire country. And of course, you got the Toronto, Montreal, all that kind of thing is in that 50. So there's many, many less options for that. My favorite route has to be up out of Spokane or to Calgary, and then if the weather permitted, which it never has for me, from Calgary go over to Banff, fly up to Jasper, and then over to I'm drawing a blank on the name of the town that begins with V. Just outside of on the west side of Jasper. But at any rate, the weather's never cooperated to get into the mountains there. So I've ended up taking the highway even up to Watson Lake sometimes just because the weather skunks me. If you can start off and go up north out of Spokane, that's beautiful. I wanted to do the trench last year, but the weather just did not cooperate at all. So I had to go out towards Terrace and Ketchikan.
And Wendy also asks, how prevalent is cell phone service on the routes through Canada?
Excellent. Your long distance between airports, Fort St. John, Grand Prairie, Fort Nelson, Watson Lake, long ways between airports. But if you're up high enough, or not even all that high, you got cell service for most of the distance. Along the highway, you got good cell service along the Cassiar route. Oddly enough, the two places you don't have cell service are Yakutat, zero cell service. Somewhere else, I forget. I'd have to think about that for a minute. But Yakutat would be super useful to have cell service, and there's none. But if you get gas, Bob lets you use his phone.
And William Stone wants to know have you used Avery Field in Laurier, Washington? It's like Fort Hill with dual customs, he said.
I have not. Send me that link, or I'll look that up. Avery Field?
Yes, it looks like Laurier or Laurier, Washington.
I'll look that up. Thank you for the tip. I appreciate it.
And I'm going to send you this chat. I'll send you the chat afterwards too, so you can see.
Thank you very much for that tip.
And somebody else had a little correction to your airport that you called Petersburg. He said it was actually Wrangell. And
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, but anyway, that happens. So the other thing, folks, is Ted has this amazing website, and that's flytoak.com. And if you haven't checked it out yet, you should. And I know that he's just having worked through this stuff with him. I know the kind of guy he is, and he'd like to have it be as accurate and thorough as possible. So, anything like those little tips or anything you can share to him that he could add to this, because he's trying to make it a resource for everybody. And I think it's really a great thing. And a lot of folks are going to take advantage of it to find their way up to Alaska. All right, so here's what I'm going to ask for one last question, Ted. Somebody wants to know what's the best route for a Bonanza versus a 182 with 800 tires?
You can do any of these routes with a Bonanza or 182. You got the range, a little more range with a Bonanza. Maybe it's comparable to 182. I'd have to look at the numbers, but you can do any of these routes. With 800 tires, you can land most of these places that are gravel runways, they're good runways. Carcross, for instance, Dry Bay. Many of the Forest Service strips, East Alsec is a little short. It's only 1,500 feet, or 1,500 feet. But some of those other ones are 2,000 feet, and they're well maintained. Generally, they're mowed fairly regularly, so you can get in there with a 182. I know a guy that landed in there with a Bonanza.
And a lot of that stuff is sea level or below, right? We're talking.
It's all sea level.
Yeah,
You don't have density altitude.
It's very, very low density altitude. So where you might not want to do it in Denver, you certainly, it's a lot more doable up in those areas.
One quick comment. Some people try and make the jump from Bellingham all the way to Ketchikan. And, you know, with a Bonanza, you got the range. Even with a lot of planes. With a Super Cub on the right there, you got the range. But goodness gracious, if anything goes awry and you got to land in Prince Rupert or somewhere else in the Canadian part and you didn't clear customs, you're going to be buried in paperwork. So I don't recommend trying to make the jump unless you got just tons of fuel and your IFR prepared to go in by the time you get up there, the weather's changed. I don't recommend doing it.
Very good. Well, thank you again, Ted Waltman. It was awesome. We greatly appreciate it. Folks, just so you know, if you know somebody else that wants to see this, the YouTube link that was in the email or on the website, or if you're watching it on YouTube Live, that link will continue to work, and you can just watch this whole presentation again if you like, and get other details from it. Next week, again, we have Lori McNichol, pretty famous mountain flying instructor, kind of been everywhere, done everything there is to do kind of person. And so she'll be real interesting. We've got a couple new ones coming up, which I just sort of listed the other day. We're working out the details. Doug Turnbull is going to be talking about flying up to Labrador, which will be interesting. And then April and Chris Neeson are going to talk about the retracing flight of passage trip that they did when they rebuilt Rinker Buck's airplane from the flight of passage story. And it's been a number of years ago now, and we're looking forward to hearing that. And that should be 2 weeks from tonight, 3 weeks from tonight. Sorry,
24th, I believe.
Yeah, something like that. So do come back. And I know it's summer and everybody wants to go out and have fun, but you can always watch this later in the middle of the night if you can't sleep. So thanks everybody for being here, and thank you again, Ted.
Thanks, Ted.
Thank you.